The big question: how did the Aztec and Inca explain the creation of their land and people? Chapter 9: Myths of the Aztec and the Inca. Aztec myths. The 5 Suns. Like the Maya, the Aztec passed down their own traditional stories or myths from one generation to the next. You have already learned that the sun played an important role in the life of the Aztec. The Aztec worshipped the sun god and made sacrifices to it. The sun is the subject of many Aztec myths, including a creation myth called the 5 Suns. In this myth, each sun represents a separate world. Aztec calendar stone. Archaeologists discovered this Aztec calendar stone beneath Mexico City's Central Square in 1790. Although it is called a calendar stone, the 24-ton disc is not a calendar at all. It served as an altar and was dedicated to the sun god. The stone's geometric face is covered with calendar signs and carvings that illustrate Aztec creation myths. The Aztecs' 4 previous worlds, or suns, jaguar, water, wind, and storm, are all represented. 2 fire serpents are carved onto the sides of the disc. According to Aztec belief, these serpents played an important role by helping to carry the sun across the sky every day. Tezcatlipoca, or Smoking Mirror, ruled the first world known as Jaguar Sun. Monstrous giants inhabited Jaguar Sun. When jaguars swallowed the giants whole, the first world came to an end. Quetzalcoatl, or Feathered Serpent, ruled the second world, known as Wind Sun. A great hurricane swept across this world, killing large numbers of people. The few survivors fled to the treetops, where they became monkeys. Tlaloc, he who makes things sprout, ruled the third world, or Storm Sun. Its inhabitants ate aquatic seeds, but very few survived the heavy rains that fall. Those people who did survive turned into birds. The goddess Chalchiuhtlicue, Lady of the Jade Skirts, ruled the fourth world, or Water Sun. A great flood engulfed the people of Water Sun and transformed the survivors into fish. One of the gods had to be sacrificed before each new world could be created. After the fourth world ended, the brave god Nanahuatzin, full of sores, threw himself into a flaming bonfire. He then became the ruler of the fifth world, called Earthquake Sun. Number 1. Smoking Mirror, ruler of Jaguar Sun. Number 2. Feathered Serpent, ruler of Wind Sun. Number 3. He who makes things sprout, ruler of Storm Sun. Number 4. Lady of the Jade Skirts, ruler of Water Sun. Number 5. Full of Sores, ruler of Earthquake Sun. The place of the prickly pear cactus. You know that myths often explain how and why events happen. You have read myths that explain how the earth was created and populated by people. Some myths also explain why cultures arose in a particular place. These homeland myths are important as a means to explain how societies are shaped by their environment. The following retelling of the Aztec homeland myth explains why this group of people chose to settle in the middle of a swamp. Long, long ago, a tribe of people traveled out from the northern part of what is now Mexico. They began moving south in search of a new place to live. Their god, Huitzilopochtli, guided them. He told them that they would know the perfect place to settle. Huitzilopochtli said that they would see an eagle sitting on a cactus with a snake in its grasp. So they continued to migrate south. They wandered for days and months and years in search of this place. After 200 years, a priest rested one day on the edge of Lake Texcoco in central Mexico. He looked up and rubbed his eyes in disbelief. There, on an island in the middle of the lake, an eagle sat perched on a cactus. The eagle was clutching a snake. The people had found their home at last. The Aztec built their capital city of Tenochtitlan on the island. The country of Mexico takes its name from the Culhua Mexica people, who later became known as the Aztec. Its modern-day flag bears the emblem of an eagle on a cactus clutching a snake. Inca myths. Viracocha, creator of all things. Just like the Maya and the Aztec, the Inca of South America have their own creation myth to explain how things came to be. This retelling of the story begins at Lake Titicaca with the Inca sun god Viracocha. Bordered by both Bolivia and Peru, this lake is the highest navigable lake in the world. In the beginning of time, total darkness blanketed the world. There was no land and no sky, only water. Then Viracocha emerged from the waters of Lake Titicaca, high in the Andes Mountains. He created land and sky. Next, he breathed life into stones, creating a giant race of men. These brainless men angered Viracocha, and he turned many of them back into stone. Then he flooded the land so nothing but water remained. Once the flood waters receded and land reappeared, Viracocha rose up out of the lake once more. This time he brought light out of darkness. He created the sun, the moon, and the stars. He created thunder and lightning. He created time by commanding the sun to move across the sky. He created birds and animals too. Then Viracocha created figures who looked a lot like him. Viracocha rising up out of the lake. Once again, Viracocha began with stones, but this time he chose much smaller ones. He painted a different figure onto each stone. He painted men and women, old and young. He painted boys and girls of different shapes and sizes. He painted pregnant women and women with babies. Some figures had long hair, some had short. Some had blue eyes, some had green. Each figure had colorful, patterned clothes. Viracocha gave them all cloaks and sandals to wear. When he finished painting, Viracocha divided the stone figures into groups, or nations, and created a language for each group. He created different songs and different seeds to plant in the ground. Then Viracocha buried these silent, motionless figures in separate homelands. They lived in darkness until he was ready to breathe life into them. Painted stone figures. Buried stone figures. When he was ready, Viracocha set out in the direction of Cusco, awakening stone figures along the way. He taught each group how to live on each parcel of land. Meanwhile, two of his helpers branched out across the land. They, too, breathed life into the colorful stones. Then the helpers taught the stone people how to live near the caves, streams, rivers, and waterfalls of their homelands. When Viracocha and his helpers had finished, they met in Cusco and set off in the direction of the sea. Pleased with their teachings, they rejoiced that new nations would rise up across the mountainous land. When they reached the Pacific Ocean, Viracocha and his helpers walked out over the waves and disappeared. Viracocha breathing life into stone figures. People say that Viracocha wandered Earth disguised as a beggar and continued to teach his people during his remaining days. Some say he performed miracles to help people with their troubled lives. Today, the places from which his stone figures emerged, caves, streams, rivers, and waterfalls, are huacas, or sacred places. The Inca depict Viracocha wearing the sun as his crown, holding thunderbolts in both hands, and crying tears of rain. He was the creator of all things. Viracocha, the Inca creator of all things. The founding of Cusco. The following myth is similar to the Aztec homeland myth. Lake Titicaca is featured in the Inca homeland myth, just as it was in the Inca myth of creation. Viracocha, the sun god, is not named in the following retelling of the story, but he is the one who is given credit for choosing Cusco as the homeland of the Inca. Many years ago, two creatures emerged from a lake at the top of the world. Manco Capac and his wife, Mama Oclo, rose up out of Lake Titicaca. They then began traveling south across the magnificent Andes Mountains. The sun god gave them a golden staff. He told them to search for a suitable spot to start a new nation of people. They would know they had arrived at this magical place when their staff sank easily into the ground. Manco Capac and Mama Oclo traveled for many days and many nights. All along the way, they tested the ground with their staff, but it would not pierce the hard earth. One day, they reached a beautiful valley. The staff sank deep into the ground with little effort. At last, they had found the land that the sun god had promised. They settled in the valley and named the city Cusco. Manco Capac took leadership over other tribes in the area. He became the first ruler of the Inca. Cusco, chosen city of the sun god, became the capital of a great empire. Manco Capac and Mama Oclo.